Well, so the fundamental issue in trying to negotiate with North Korea, of course, is trust. Because we're in a situation where basically everybody has their guns pointed at each other. And we're asking North Korea to put down their gun, their nuclear weapons. And so in that situation, they're asking for assurance that they will not be harmed afterwards. And I don't think we've gotten to that point. Talks were going well as long as we were progressing on that route of reconciliation, of building trust, of dangling before them the possibility of a security guarantee. And that was the period basically from the Pyeongchang Olympics in February 2018 to the Inter-Korean military agreement in September. And after that, things started to go downhill as we switched over from a period that was not focused on reconciliation and trust building, but instead on demands regarding to denuclearization. Working level talks between North Korea and the US started to stall, and ultimately this left a big gap by the time we saw the two actors come together in Hanoi. I think that the major problem right now is that in the United States, as well as to a certain extent in South Korea, people understand the notion of security guarantee as a bargaining chip and something that North Korea has to pay for. Whereas it would be, to a certain extent, a basis on which negotiation could progress. Now, there are ways in which one can structure security guarantees in a way that benefits South Korean and US interests. Well, there are two theories as to why North Korea started to open up the talks by the beginning of 2018. The first is that maximum pressure was effective, that North Korea had too much pressure to bear, and that as a result, it was ready to negotiate out of desperation, out of fear that they would ultimately collapse. The other theory is that North Korea started to negotiate because they felt like they were at maximum bargaining power. In the year before, in November 2017, Kim Jong-un declared that he had completed the North Korean nuclear program by putting the whole of the continental United States within range of ICBMs. And as a result, if that were the reason that North Korea started to talk, then they would be thinking of themselves as a position of strength. So China has had an ambiguous stance, of course, on North Korea, because on the one hand, they're not happy with North Korea's nuclear weapons, and so they have agreed to various rounds of UN Security Council sanctions resolutions. On the other hand, from a Chinese national security perspective, the prospect of having North Korea collapse would create much more of a headache than the nuclear weapons actually do. And so China has always opposed unilateral sanctions from the United States, for instance. And it has always made sure that North Korea doesn't collapse. For China to have six-party talks, of course, allows them to have a place at the table. The six-party talks were originally also held in Beijing, so this was an opportunity for China to exert some influence. However, they don't want to be in a position where people will look to them to solve the North Korea problem for the United States. Ultimately, the line that they're pushing is this problem has to be resolved between the United States and North Korea. Okay. Kim Yo-jong was sent to pay respects to Lee Ho, Lee Ho being a champion of reunification, not just as First Lady when she was accompanying Kim Dae-jung, but also when she continued to work towards reunification in her own right, and especially when she led a delegation to pay respects to Kim Jong-il when at the funeral of Kim Jong-il. And that was at considerable political risk to herself again, because the South Korean government had not sent a delegation back then. So it's a very personal tribute to Lee Ho, a matter of elementary reciprocity. Well, first, I mean, if we look at the Wise Honest, which is a huge cargo ship, and then the Pueblo, which is a small military ship, there is already a difference in size. But ultimately, I think what's important is not the ship itself, not the Wise Honest itself, even though it's supposed to be the second biggest ship in North Korea's merchant fleet. The reason that North Korea called this one of the biggest issues in U.S.-North Korea relations right now is that the way in which the United States seized the Wise Honest theoretically puts the entire North Korean merchant fleet at risk. And so North Korea will want assurances that its other ships will not be seized. It's not so much about the Wise Honest itself. On the timeline, Kim Jong-un gave a speech in April saying that he would wait until the end of the year, until there is a deal proposed to him that is not that he got in Hanoi, which was basically to disarm. In that sense, if we're thinking about this end-of-year deadline, it also fits with the calendar of U.S. elections, U.S. presidential elections, at a time where basically Trump will probably be too busy to have any sort of negotiations with North Korea. And so it makes sense for them to choose that deadline. If we miss the opportunity of having a trilateral summit right now at the end of June, ultimately, Trump still has a couple months to make a bold decision to get an interim deal with North Korea rather than the big deal that he's been hoping for.